Imagine being a filmmaker or storyteller rejected over 40 times, even with a Hollywood producer attached, before making a massive blockbuster movie nominated for 4 Oscars and featured in IMAX around the world. What's the secret that makes it all click, and can you use these tricks on your next film or story? We're going to look at 7 easy ways to create timeless cinema we found in Back to the Future, so you can make a personal, powerful movie that stands the test of time. And we got a chance to see this film on one of the biggest screens in Japan. It looked and sounded amazing, and we haven't seen this film in theaters since 2015 on Back to the Future Day, and want to share everything that we've observed when watching this film because your blockbuster is in the building blocks. So let's dive in. By the way, we put the script for Back to the Future in the description below, so you can check that out later. But maybe you've got a big idea or multiple ideas and themes. How do you weave all of that into a compelling narrative? Back to the Future has multiple ideas, themes, and desires all weaved into one central narrative. And the cool thing about that is whether it's romance, getting the guy, getting the girl, or standing up to the class bully, or survival by trying to fix time and history, or getting your dream car so you can impress your friends, all of these are relatable ways in for your audience to connect to, relate to your film or story. So if you've got multiple ideas, whether it's theme or desire, just find a way to work it into your narrative, and you'll see more access points for your audience to connect to your film or story. The opening sequence of this film is so impressive. It sets up so much critical story information and wastes 0 words. Everything has value, everything has meaning. From the dialogue to the design, the visual elements, everything has weight and moves character forward, moves the plot forward, and sets everything up so perfectly before he meets Doc with the DeLorean. So if you've got a lot of story information, make sure it's all laid out. Every beat counts, every bit of dialogue counts, every visual element counts for your film or story. Back to the Future is a masterclass in setups and payoffs and reverse engineering different story points and interesting moments in the story throughout the film. The cool thing about that is you can do the same thing with your film. So saying you've got a great scene in scene 8, you set it up in scene 1. But then something that's also in scene 1 gets paid off in scene 3 or 5, or something in scene 3 gets paid off in scene 5 or 6. And all of these different pockets of things that you set up are like dynamite that's happening on the roller coaster of your story. So as you're outlining, give yourself freedom to discover interesting moments throughout your film, set them up earlier in the film, and create an entire roller coaster of experience for your story. One weird thing this film does is repeating story information and repeating story visuals, noticing that some characters will say the same thing again in a different way, or certain explanations of the story being told by a different character in a very fresh way, or certain visuals being repeated. And the only reason I can think that the filmmakers would do that is to make sure that the story is being transmitted to the audience, that the audience might be taking a lot in the first time, they might need a second clue in. So if you've got a big story, big idea, big themes, go ahead and repeat story information. Have it repeated in a fresh new way, visuals, using story repetition to take your audience on the roller coaster of your film. But maybe you've got the perfect story sorted out. How do you translate it to the big screen? Back to the Future has simple, clean, easy to understand visuals and cinematography throughout, whether it's the composition of the actors, placement of production design elements, all the visuals are help telling the story inside the frame. So when you're setting up your shots, go ahead and make the actors' placement as simple as possible, production values, anything that belongs in, anything that doesn't belong goes out to help tell your story. But it's not just simple visuals or cinematography that makes the storytelling so dynamic. You've got things like staging, where the characters move in the foreground, background, and interact with the environment to create depth and life for your story. For example, in the scene with the DeLorean just went back in time, Doc and Marty are interacting in the foreground and background. It creates 4 completely different shots all in one camera setup. Or the scene when they're at Doc's house, trying to figure out how to harness lightning and use the clock tower. There's 5 completely different shots all in one camera setup, and it makes it feel so alive and spontaneous. Or the scene at the school when they're trying to figure out how to get the parents back together. There's 8 literally completely different shots just in the shot composition throughout this explainer scene. And it's so much more interesting than seeing everything play out and the characters are just talking. So you could try that on your next film or story. It almost taps into the idea of doing theater And weirdly enough, this film actually got transferred into a musical. And it's weird seeing these shots next to each other because they both have that sense of theatricality of things unfolding right before your eyes. So if you need to, try using something like theatrical staging to create depth and dynamic for your story. And if this has been helpful or inspirational so far, go ahead and clap the like button so we can reach other filmmakers, storytellers, and new friends like you. But really, what if classic techniques like staging feels a little repetitive? Back to the Future picks just the right moments for certain camera techniques and dolly moves throughout the course of the film. If you're familiar with the story, you'll notice that some of these moments are pivotal, emotional moments throughout the course of the film that they're using just a dolly move in that specific part of the scene, and it makes those moments pop. So when you're doing your shot design and planning your cinematography, think about a specific camera angle, lens, or dolly move, camera move in or out of the frame to make those moments pop throughout the course of your film. But what if you've got great camera angles or shot design? How do you make the performances pop? You might remember Back to the Future as a simple story with simple characters, but seeing this film in IMAX, I was blown away by the acting and the subtlety of this film. As a trained actor, as a trained director, there's so much nuance and subtext going on between the lines. It makes the film feel alive and so honest. Every performance in this film is so honest. So when you're directing your film, no matter how simple the dialogue, no matter how simple the story might seem, find actors who can fill in that subtext and give direction that can flesh out all the different beats and everything happening between the beats for your story. But what if you've got great actors and don't have budget for things like CGI or special effects? Part of what makes this film feel so timeless is its use of real props and real things that the actors can look at, touch, and interact with. If you're creating a sci-fi film or genre film, try to make everything as real as possible, practical effects, practical props the actors can use. If you're doing a sci-fi, try to get all your graphics in camera, on your phones, on your screen, so that the actors have something to look at. It's going to look that much more real for you and for the audience. But if you're gonna create a genre film, just go all the way with it. Think about it. Back to the Future is really just a period film dressed up as a science fiction film. But it's all those little elements they wrote into the story that make it feel like a timeless sci-fi classic, like the sci-fi comic book, the novel, the character likes watching sci-fi, Doc is a scientist doing science experiments the entire film. Imagine something like Star Wars, where they don't go to space, or they don't have dogfights with a Death Star. All of these things feed into the concept of Star Wars. Something like Inception. Conceptually, it could have been a lot simpler. Maybe all of it happens off camera, but no. Cobb is a dream specialist, and his trauma is related to actually performing Inception. And who haunts his dreams? It's the wife from the trauma. Or something like The Matrix. Sci-fi film could have played out so many different ways, but they find ways to work in things like telephones and computers, and Neo is a hacker and understands these things in the real world as well as in the Matrix. So think about your genre, what your genre conventions and elements are, work those into your story to clue your audience in to your film. But what if your film is smaller in scale or scope and you just want it to feel larger than life? Probably the craziest hack in Back to the Future is how they use score to create a sense of scale. The composer actually says he doesn't think the film is visually that big, but the director wanted something larger than life. He thought the shots were kind of small, doesn't have a big visual sense of scale, but he said, I'll use real instruments and create big themes and songwriting techniques to have those big themes built throughout the film. Imagine movies like Star Wars. Mostly real instruments, big themes repeated throughout the film give it a sense of timelessness. Movies like E.T., mostly real orchestral instruments throughout the film, big themes that you remember. Most people don't think about the music from The Matrix, but it's very little, if any, electronic or sci-fi sounds, mostly orchestra, mostly real instruments. So for your film, if you've got a small scale production you want to feel larger than life, try Music Library with orchestration, big instruments and themes throughout your film to tell your story. But what if you're worried that your film is so big or high concept that people might not connect with your blockbuster? One source of inspiration for Back to the Future was a question in the writing phase. What if you could go back in time and meet one of your parents in high school? What would that interaction look like? And would you be friends with your parents? And that simple question led to a completely different story that we all know and love. But that sense, that memory, that question remains as a part of the film. So here's a question to ask yourself in your writing. What is your personal connection to your story? What is the thing that you want to say through your characters? What's the thing you want to explore through your premise? And if you get in touch with your personal connection, identifying that gives you a relatable seed of inspiration throughout your entire film. It might turn into something else, but your audience will always have a way in with any genre, any concept to relate to your film or story. But what if it seems like your dream project isn't moving forward or even getting rejected and everything seems impossible? Back to the Future was rejected over 40 times by different studios, even with Steven Spielberg's name attached to it. Some people thought it was too raunchy, some people thought it was too soft and not edgy enough. You can't please everyone. So remember, in all labor, there is profit. There's no work that you do to prepare your script, to visualize your film, plan your shots out, think about how you're going to work with your actors, is all preparation for the project that's laying ahead. So do your prep, keep your eyes on the prize, and wait for that green light. But if you're still gearing up for your next big blockbuster, you're going to want to watch this video to step up your storytelling and take your cinematic game to the next level.